Hey, Thelema came out recently, and I've wanted to put out a guide, but I've been a little bit busy, so it took me a little while to get this out, but better late than never. In this guide, I'll talk about Coralie's openers, what she does in the beginning of battle, and how she can get all of her different buffs. That way you'll know how to add or remove damage based on what you need. It's also the same actions that she'll be doing to refresh buffs after Stellar Outburst ends. Then I'll talk about Senadina. She's a bit confusing because she never takes the field, so how does she buff the team and how does she get SP? So all of her stuff is just for general knowledge. It's not actually going to improve your gameplay because she's pretty much automatic in this team, but I'll cover all the skills and how they work so I can explain how she's self-sustaining. Then I'll talk about quite a lot of Thelema's skills in detail. And then finally, I'll also cover one of Songque's skills, and hopefully you'll learn something here and find things useful and use it, apply it to your runs in the future. So first up, we've got the Coralie openers. So she's got several different things that she can do, and they're mostly tied to her weapon, but she also has something that she can do with her ultimate. So first is you can use her weapon attack twice at the beginning of battle. There's no reason to not do this. There's a buff that she can get for using both her weapon actives and consuming the 2 hammering field that she has at the start of battle, and that is you can get 2 stacks of Let It Burn. And it also triggers her 3-piece Stigmata effect. So these things, they're free, you can precast them right at the beginning of battle. You should always go for these. The 3-piece Stigmata effect actually has a cooldown that's not listed in the description. So if you want to get 2 stacks, 2 activations of it so that it goes up to 30 seconds, then you don't want to swing your weapon twice in a row because it's actually too fast and you'll only activate it once instead of twice. So don't swing your weapon like this. If you need a little bit more firepower, you can actually wait for the enemy to be on the battlefield first. If the enemy is on the battlefield and then you cast your weapon active, then you'll actually get some extra buffs from her weapon. You don't actually have to hit the enemy to get this buff, so the moment you consume Hammering Field, that's good enough. If you need even more damage, you can jump and use her aerial weapon attack, and then when she hits the ground you can use weapon attack again, and it will convert her combo attack into a serious hammering. Serious hammering, if it hits an enemy, it will inflict serious breakdown and they take more total damage. This is a pretty powerful debuff, so that makes this opener very common. And because only the last hit needs to hit the enemy, you can actually precast the aerial weapon attack and the grounded weapon attack. But of course, if you precast it, you won't get the buffs from her weapon, since that requires the enemy to be on the battlefield. So if you want more damage, then you'll want to make sure you use your 2 hammering field after the enemy is on the battlefield. So you can do this by precasting the aerial attack, but just use the regular attack instead of the weapon version. And then when she hits the ground, the enemy needs to spawn in at this time before you use the hammering field to get the serious hammering. Then after serious hammering ends, just use your weapon one more time. Serious hammering also has a secondary effect, which is it triggers Stellar Drain and it gives 20 Astral Ring Intensity to the team. In rotations where you want to use Stellar Outburst as soon as possible, then this move is always used. Finally, the ultimate. The ultimate applies the same buff as a serious hammering, so if you choose to use your ultimate, you can actually skip the serious hammering. The ultimate will also give you her 2-piece Stigmata buff, and it'll also give you the 3rd stack of Let It Burn at the beginning of battle. And it will also be able to give you the 3rd stack of Direct Hammering at the beginning of battle. To get this though, you'll have to use ultimate after the enemy has spawned. Keep in mind that if you use the ultimate opener, you'll still have to use weapon attacks to get the weapon attack related buffs. All these buffs are things you want to do at the beginning of battle, and also after Stellar Outburst expires, because you'll need to refresh your buffs. When you enter Stellar Outburst, you'll actually get all of Coralie's buffs, so everything that I just mentioned, so you don't have to worry about it when you enter Stellar Outburst. Next, we'll talk a little bit about Senadina. One of the most common things I've seen is people wondering how Senadina works in this team, because she doesn't take the field at all. So how does she gain SP for herself, and how does she give buffs to the team? So we'll go in order of how everything in the battle plays out. I think that's the most sensible way to talk about this, otherwise you can get lost in details really quickly. So first up, Senadina actually starts battle with 30 additional SP. It's one of her skills, so she'll have 30 SP at the beginning of battle. And then what happens is she actually got a new skill in version 7.4, which is the custom module radon skill. So how this skill works is at the beginning of battle, or when she enters and exits Stellar Outburst state, she actually consumes up to 30 SP to boost characters' total damage, and then also when you use the maximum amount of 30 SP, then she actually gives Elemental Breach to Wheel of Destiny characters, which would just be Thelema on the team. And then that buff lasts for 30 seconds. So basically the buff has 100% uptime. It'll only expire if you are if you're not in Stellar Outburst for more than 30 seconds, then it'll expire. So that can happen at the beginning of battle, you're not in Stellar Outburst, but you start with the buff. If you let 30 seconds run out, it expires. And then if you exit Stellar Outburst state, you're not in Stellar Outburst. And then if you let the 30 seconds run out, then it expires. If you don't have at least 30 SP, then you'll still get the total damage buff, since that's proportional to the amount of SP that you spend. But you will not get the Elemental Breach buff, since that requires you to spend exactly 30. But this won't happen in regular play, because Senadina actually gets more SP than she needs. This will only happen if you actually use her SP for something else, like if you use her ultimate and then you suddenly don't have any SP. So next we'll talk about how Senadina actually gets SP without ever taking the field. So first is she actually gains 25 SP when Stellar Drain is consumed. So every time she uses her Stellar Drain, she'll gain 25 SP. But you might be wondering, how does she use her Stellar Drain if she doesn't take the field? So Thelema actually has an ability where Shadow Star characters share Stellar Drain effects, and that's in her leader skill. So her leader skill says when there's 2 members in the team, at least 2 members, then harmonized Shadow Star characters will actually share Stellar Drain effects. So what this means is Thelema can actually trigger, can be the on-field character and use Stellar Drain, and both she and Senadina will get whatever effects are tied to using Stellar Drains because it's shared. So when she uses her Stellar Drain, then Senadina will gain 25 SP. And the thing is, they each have Stellar Drain at the beginning of battle. They each have 1 stack. So you can actually you can consume Stellar Drain a second time on Thelema, and then Senadina will gain another 25 SP. So that's 50 SP already. And then Thelema has another skill where whenever she uses her ultimate, harmonized Shadow Star characters in the team, other than herself, gain 10 SP. So that's actually 60 SP now. So that would be enough for Senadina to refresh the buff once when she enters Outburst, and then refresh the buff again when she exits Outburst. So basically, she has infinite SP because she gets exactly as much as she needs. So now we'll do a quick demonstration of all the skills that we just went over so you can see how it works in battle. So Senadina, she has 90 SP right now. When I start the battle, you'll see a minus 30 appear. That's because she's paying the 30 SP cost, but her SP will actually still stay at 90 because she starts with 30 extra SP. So the extra SP she starts with basically covers the cost. So we'll enter the portal now, and then you'll be able to see the minus 30 right away. So that's the minus 30 SP cost, still at 90 because she starts with the 30 extra. So if I switch to Thelema, you'll see that she has the buff. So that's the Elemental Breach custom module radon buff. It lasts for 30 seconds. And Senadina has 90 SP now, so we'll keep that in mind. So let's trigger Stellar Drain twice with Thelema right now. That's the first Stellar Drain. And so extra 25 SP means Senadina will have 115. So you can see that here. And then we'll trigger Stellar Drain a second time. And then now Senadina will have 140. Reminder that this effect is only shared by Shadow Star characters in the team, so if you trigger Stellar Drain with Coralie, Senadina will not get 25 SP from that. So now let's try using our ultimate. So this gives 10 SP to other harmonized Shadow Star characters. So Senadina should have 150 SP now. And you can see that there. So now let's enter Astral Outburst and to refresh our buff. So Senadina will pay 30 SP to activate that buff, so she'll be down to 120. And then once Stellar Outburst expires, the buff will be refreshed again, and Senadina will pay the 30 SP cost again, so she'll be down to 90, which is what she started the battle with. So it got refreshed now. We'll swap to Senadina and check her SP. And there you see it's 90. So that's basically how Senadina's buff lasts forever, because right now we would use Stellar Drain twice. She would get 50 SP from it, and then we would use Thelema's ultimate, and then she gets another 10. She'll have 60 SP. That's enough to enter and exit Stellar Outburst and refresh the buff in both cases. And now finally onto Thelema. So Thelema's whole kit revolves around getting 6 stacks of Banquet Enjoyment and then using Moment of Indulgence when you have 6 stacks. So the method you use to get Banquet Enjoyment will actually affect the damage of Moment of Indulgence. So her basic attack sequence 3 will make her Moment of Indulgence do another 120% attack of ice damage. Combo attack is 75%, weapon skill is 90%. This increase happens for each Banquet Enjoyment that you get. So if you use basic sequence 3 6 times to get 6 Banquet Enjoyment, you'll actually increase Moment of Indulgence damage by 720%. She's got several other ways to fill her Banquet Enjoyment as well. If you use her evasion, then it will also be 75%. And then she starts battle with 3 Banquet Enjoyment if you have her signature weapon, and each one of those give 150% or 450% total. When you use Astral Outburst, it also instantly fills her meter, and every single Banquet Enjoyment filled in that way also gives 150%. And then if you're S2 rank or higher, when you use your ultimate, it will also instantly fill your meter. Each one of the Banquet Enjoyments filled in this way is 100%. The last way to fill her Banquet Enjoyment is by using her QTE. Her QTE will give her 2 Banquet Enjoyment, but it doesn't say how much damage boost it gives. But from my testing, I think it actually might be 0%. So you actually don't gain any damage boost of Moment of Indulgence, but then the benefit is you get to fill the bar a little bit quicker because it fills 2 at once, and then also the QTE itself does damage as well. All this is very important because how you fill your Banquet Enjoyment will affect your Moment of Indulgence damage. So if you ever want to compare damage numbers and you're doing more or less damage with Moment of Indulgence, you definitely want to check how the Banquet Enjoyment was obtained, because that will affect the damage of that attack. Also, maximizing Moment of Indulgence damage is not the key to maximizing your DPS, because the individual attacks themselves also matter. So you don't necessarily want to use, for example, 6 basic sequence 3 just because it gives the highest multiplier, which is 120%. Combo attack, while it's a lot lower, it only gives 75%. The combo attack itself is quite strong. And similarly, weapon attack is in between the two. It gives 90%, but it's also pretty fast, which is where the advantage of weapon attack comes in. So you definitely want to experiment with your rotations and use a mixture of all the moves and find out what gives you the best overall damage and not just what gives you the best Moment of Indulgence damage. Also, you need to be careful to not just look at the attack multipliers or attack percent mods of the basic sequence 3, weapon attack, combo attack, and also the hold weapon attack, because that doesn't tell the full story. There are abilities in Thelema's kit, and also in the kits of her supports, and also in her stigs, and also the stigs of her supports possibly, that all give modifiers to specific attacks. For example, increases basic attack damage by 30%, or increases weapon attack damage by an amount, increases combo attack damage by an amount. So they're not always all going to be treated equal. So just because, say, basic sequence 3 does 500% and combo attack only does 200%, it doesn't necessarily mean that combo attack is weaker, because combo attack could have more effects on it that will actually make the final damage higher. So unless you do all the math and add everything up, which can be a lot of work, it's easiest to just do a fight and try different things out and see how much damage you're dealing to the HP bar, and that's probably the best way to figure out what's your best option. So next passive skill is actually one that makes Thelema very, very interesting. So when she gets Banquet of Enjoyment from an attack, if the attack is not the same attack that was last used to get Banquet Enjoyment, then this attack deals bonus ice damage. So she's got 4 different methods of attack to gain Banquet Enjoyment. It would be her normal sequence 3, her combo attack, and her weapon attack, and then her hold weapon attack. Though although they're both weapon attacks, they're considered different for as far as this skill is concerned. So there are 4 different ways, and the fun of Thelema is being able to freestyle and fluidly switch between any of the 4 as you want. So for casual players, she's definitely a lot of fun. But for competitive players, you're probably going to be wondering what's the best sequence for me to use, and you'll be primarily using that one. So before going into the full sequences, it makes sense to talk about cancels first. So when you're alternating between Thelema's 4 moves, the basic sequence 3, combo attack, weapon, and hold weapon, there's only 2 rules that you need to be aware of. That is, weapon attack does not cancel into basic, so generally that should be avoided. So that's this one, followed by the basic 3. So on the ground, if you look at the weapon attack animation, she actually brings her left leg all the way around. Or sorry, her right leg. It goes all the way around once, and that's the end of the animation. So if we use basic sequence 3 after that, you can see how much the leg animation plays before she starts attacking. So she almost brings it all the way around. So if you cancel it to a different move like combo attack, then you'll actually see that she doesn't bring her leg around as far, so that's why the cancel is actually quicker. And similarly, if you cancel into hold weapon. It might be difficult to see in the ground, but the aerial version is very, very obvious. So the aerial weapon attack, she actually does a flip. So if you use her normal sequence 3 afterwards, she'll always do the full flip before the normal sequence 3 comes out. But if you cancel into combo attack or hold weapon, she will not do the full flip, and it is very obvious. So that's the evidence that weapon attack does not cancel into the normal sequence 3, so do not do that. The second rule is that some fights, Thelema should not use her basic sequence 3 in the air, and this is because she's actually too close to the ground. So after the basic sequence 3 lands, she's unable to cancel into anything until she lands first. So here you'll be able to see her try to use basic sequence 3 in the air, cancel it into weapon attack, or combo attack, or hold weapon attack, and all 3 of them end up doing the grounded version. So those are the 2 rules of cancelling. Make sure you never do either of those 2 things. But there's actually one more point about cancelling that's worth noting. And it's not actually a rule or something to avoid, it's just something to be aware of. And that is her grounded weapon attack. It has 2 parts. The second part is where she throws a spinning blade out, so we'll demonstrate that. So when you fill the 6th Banquet Enjoyment with that attack, it's possible to cancel into Moment of Indulgence before the spinning blade comes out, which will result in lost damage. The amount of damage loss is very little though, so most of the time it won't matter, and it's better to just cancel it and leave it as is, because I presume it's probably a bit faster since you don't have to wait for the blade to come out. But in the very off chance that you're missing a very, very, very tiny bit of damage, then that's probably something that's worth knowing. Now let's take a look at 4 different sequences. They've already been sorted by their speed, but their damage is going to be a little bit different, so let's see what happens. So there's actually a strong correlation between speed and damage in the first 3 sequences. The first one is actually the fastest but does the lowest damage. Second one is a tiny bit slower but does a bit more damage. The third one is noticeably slower now, about half a second to a full second slower, but it also does more damage. It's a very powerful sequence. The only thing to note about this one is that it does use normal 3 in the air, so you will not be able to use this in some fights because one of the rules I pointed out earlier, the normal 3 in the air will cause Thelema some problems, so you will have to use a variation of it sometimes. And then the 4th sequence completely breaks one of the rules I mentioned earlier because it's using weapon and then normal 3, so that doesn't actually cancel, so that's the reason why this sequence is slow. And then the damage is also not worth it either because it's actually weaker than the 3rd sequence, so it's slower and weaker, so it's just not worth using. There's a lot more sequences than the 4 that I've shown here, but I can't possibly show all of them, so I'll leave the rest for you to try and experiment. One thing I want to point out is that in some fights, most notably Rondo and Kevin, Thelema will actually need to apply rime trauma to those bosses, and then you won't be able to use the same sequence over and over because you'll have to insert the hold weapon for rime trauma somewhere in the sequence. It could be, the first attack in the sequence, it could be the 5th attack. It really depends on the freeze timing. So you have to be adaptable and ready to insert the hold weapon anywhere in the sequence when you're playing, so you have to be flexible. For rime trauma, the grounded version is faster than the aerial version, but the aerial version does do more damage, so you have to decide between which of the 2 to use based on what you need. So coming back to the passive skill I covered earlier, there's actually another paragraph on it that we didn't talk about yet. So in battle, moving, jumping, and evading after not attacking for 1 second causes the next attack to deal bonus ice damage. The damage increases with time and reaches a maximum in 2 seconds, dealing up to 300% attack of bonus ice damage. So if you actually don't attack for a while and then you get this buff, then the next time you attack you'll actually trigger an additional hit. That extra hit will actually be this 300% attack of bonus ice damage. So if you ever wonder where that extra number is coming from, this is the source. Next is one of her evasion related skills. So this is actually not her evasion skill, so meaning even if the evasion skill is on cooldown, you can still trigger this. It's something separate. And every time you trigger an ultimate evasion, you get an extra instance of ice damage, and it's 280% attack of ice damage. So whenever you deal an attack after an ultimate evasion, you actually see an extra number. That extra number is this effect happening. So in this example, you can actually see 2 extra numbers attached to her normal or basic 1. And this is because one of them is the ultimate evasion, 280% attack of ice damage. And then the other number is from the previous skill, where after not attacking for a period of time, you get a bonus ice damage as well. So that's where these extra numbers are coming from. So if you're ever wondering, then these 2 skills are the source of these random magic numbers. Evasions are a little bit hard to farm because they take time, so I don't think you'll be farming ultimate evasions deliberately to trigger this skill for more damage, but you can get this extra ultimate evasion damage for free sometimes. For example, during boss transitions, there's usually attacks you can dodge at no time cost, and then also whenever you cast Moment of Indulgence, she has to evade first, and if you're lucky, that evade could be an ultimate evasion, and then you can get this extra damage boost. The next skill is her tailor-made dress. This skill is important when you're fighting enemies with shields, so most notably Hersher of the Void. Her basic attack inflicts weakened, and then she actually does more damage to the shields of weakened enemies. You actually don't need to land the basic attack. When you use the basic attack, if an enemy is in range, they will get the debuff already. There are also other attacks that are considered as basic attacks. When you use Stellar Outburst, she'll actually unleash an attack called Stellar Assault. This is actually considered a basic attack because it inflicts weaken. Next is one of Thelema's skills that's on her signature weapon. This one is very, very important. This allows her ultimate to create a time frozen domain for 3 seconds, which is very powerful because it actually freezes all the buffs, so you effectively get to extend all your buffs by 3 seconds. And in her Stellar Outburst rotation, she can actually use ult twice, so that actually will extend buffs by 6 seconds, which is huge. It also allows her to inflict rime trauma multiple times while only consuming one of her rime stacks. This actually might have some applications. The other half of this ability is that at the end of the time frozen domain, it actually does ice damage, and enemies who take that damage actually get a debuff, and there's no other way to get this debuff. And it makes enemies take more total damage. So this debuff is a reason why ultimate is generally used earlier in the rotation. Maybe not always the first thing in the rotation, but it will be one of the first things that you do, if not the first. There's actually one small difference between this ability when used in Part 2 teams versus Part 1 teams. When you're entering Stellar Outburst, or when Wheel of Destiny is activated, which basically means if Thelema is the team leader, then you'll actually get the total damage taken debuff the moment the ultimate hits. You'll notice this when you use their ultimate, because the first hit of the ultimate actually does a little bit less damage than all the other hits afterwards. It's because the first hit triggers the debuff and then all the other hits after get the debuff, so that's why those hits do a bit more damage. So when you're using the Part 2 team, you'll get this effect. When you're using the Part 1 team, you don't have Stellar Outburst, and also you don't have Wheel of Destiny activated. So basically this ability doesn't apply, so you'll only get the debuff after the ice damage hits, so only after the 3-second time stop ends. Finally, the last Thelema skill that I'm going to talk about is in her Astral Ring. So when you enter Stellar Outburst, she'll actually be able to summon phantoms to aid in battle. When you summon a phantom, she'll actually gain a buff called Rondo in the Shadows. This basically allows her to build meter twice as fast. By default, Rondo in the Shadows lasts 5 seconds, but Senadina actually has her own skill, which makes her Rondo in the Shadows actually last 11 seconds. So depending on whether you use Senadina's Shadow first or Coralie's Shadow first, your rotation will change a little bit, because you're going to get a longer shadow than a shorter shadow, or a shorter shadow and then a longer shadow. So sometimes there'll be a case where you use one before the other and vice versa. So be careful of that. Rondo in the Shadows also lets Thelema generate after images to deal extra damage, but there are actually ways where you can lose damage. So this is very important to know, so do not do these things. The first way is if you end your sequence with the hold weapon in the air and you cancel into Moment of Indulgence too early, then the shadow will not appear in the field. The next case is much more common for uncapped FPS players, but for 120 FPS players it's rare but not impossible. I've never had it happen to me, but I've heard players say that it has happened to them. And that is if you end your sequence with the combo attack and you cancel into Moment of Indulgence too early, then the shadow doesn't appear. When the shadow doesn't appear, it will actually impact your Moment of Indulgence damage. So if you ever look at your runs and you see some of your Moment of Indulgence damage drop off in a rotation, you should definitely check if the shadow appeared or not, because it's very likely that it didn't. If you end your sequence with a grounded hold weapon, the shadow will appear, but it'll get stalled by your Moment of Indulgence. And then if you use a character summon, so Senadina or Coralie summon immediately after, it'll actually override the shadow, and the shadow will just disappear off the field before it gets to attack. Finally, onto Songque's skills. I'm only going to cover one of her skills, and you get this at S rank, so as long as you have this collaborator, you'll have this skill. It basically gives 2 bonus Astral Ring Intensity when team members use their weapon attack. So when Stellar Outburst ends, it's always good to use one weapon attack on Thelema before swapping out, so she can trigger this ability for herself, and then start the cooldown on it 15 seconds, so that she can trigger it a second time when she comes back in later. When you swap out, you'll most likely swap into Coralie and use her weapon skills and trigger this effect, because she gets buffs for the team using her weapon skills. During this time, Thelema will still be on switch cooldown, so if you're really fast, you can even swap in Senadina and trigger this skill with Senadina once, and then go back to Thelema and start DPSing. So that's it for the Thelema guide. I think I covered everything I wanted to. Hopefully I didn't forget anything. If I did, I'll add it in the description.